Welcome to Rates and Barrels. It's Tuesday, January 20th. Derek Van Riper here with Eno Saris. On this episode, we preview the catcher position. We dig into both two catcher leagues and single catcher formats, which are actually more popular overall, even though most drafts this time of year are being drafted in two catcher formats. We'll break things down based on NFBC ADP. If you're new to the series, we have a few of these episodes out already, so check out third base, shortstop, and second base. They are already in the feed and on our YouTube channel. We go through top to bottom based on average draft position, looking at where players are being drafted right now, talk about whether they are overvalued, undervalued, or appropriately valued for the upcoming season. And most weeks, we've got 5 full episodes a week on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. So we're glad you're here. Welcome to the middle of our position preview series. They're some of the biggest episodes we put out all season long. If you want to continue the conversation after the show, join our Discord. You can do that with the link in the show description. Like this video if you're watching on YouTube, and subscribe wherever you enjoy your podcast. So all the preambling is aside, we're going to go right to it because we tend to run pretty long in these episodes. Tier 1 is a tier of 1 at the catcher position, and it is no surprise to anybody. It's Cal Raleigh, all by himself, sitting up there right around that pick 15 mark. So you're thinking late first rounder, early second rounder in a 15-team league. I don't really know what to say about Cal Raleigh at this point because I thought I had him figured out going into last season. He put the ball in the air more than ever, 25.1% ground ball rate, and that turned into a good thing. It was an MVP-worthy campaign, 60 homers, 125 RBIs, 110 runs, and 14 steals. The only category where he's not really good is going to be batting average. That's been the case his whole career. He still got that up to 247 last year, got on base at a 359 clip, and slugged 589. So all that is to say, this was an amazing season he just put down, and we had seen basically top 5 finishes at the position each of the previous 2 seasons. But everybody wants to know, can he do something like what he just did in 2025 again in 2026?
In 2 catcher leagues last year, Cal Raleigh was the 3rd best player in fantasy baseball.
Player,
Aaron
not
Judge,
just catcher, player.
Shohei Ohtani, Cal Raleigh. So, the one thing that is always different about 2 catcher leagues is that the positional adjustment is huge in terms of unadjusted. So no position value in there. Oh, he slips to 4th. Behind Juan Soto. But, when you look at projections for this year, like when you say, oopsie has Cal Raleigh as the 12th overall bat in baseball this year, in fantasy baseball this year, that's for 2 catcher leagues. Be careful that you have your settings right for your league. And of that $28 he's supposedly worth, 18 of those are just value that because he's a catcher. Positional value there. So, there's a lot to it. I don't know that he's a first or second round pick for non-2 catcher leagues. There's a big toggle there. But he is a top bat in every league, and he's going to be very tempting for a lot of people to take. Of course, there's going to be lots of pundits like us that are going to say, hey, the regression is obvious. He's going to regress. But I do think there's a question of what level does he regress to. I just did something that's fairly unscientific, but what I did was I tried to find, the season after a 50+% increase in home runs. So on the left, you have Brady Anderson, the patron saint of huge increases. Jose Bautista, Chris Davis, George Foster, Cecil Fielder, Ryan Howard. This is the group of players I came up with. If he regresses like they do, because there's a lot of one-hit wonders in there, then he'll only hit quote unquote 39 homers next year only. But then that's right where the projections have him. So they're regressing him heavily. The problem is the season after a 60 homer season, just a 60 homer season, now you're talking about the elite power hitters of all time. It's Aaron Judge, Babe Ruth, Sammy Sosa 3 times, Mark McGwire twice, Barry Bonds. When you do that, you would regress Cal Raleigh to 45 homers. Now, only one projection system has him hitting more than 40 homers. That's the bat without the StatCast in it. And it has him hitting 44. So you do have a selection of projections that kind of regress to different baselines. In fact, I was talking to Jordan Rosenblum about, aging and regression and projection systems. And he said the regression amount is basically the hugest difference between projection systems. It's almost more than aging. So has he joined the likes of, Roger Maris and Babe Ruth? Or is he, I actually think, even on the 50% increase list, Cecil Fielder, Ryan Howard, like he could just be like those guys where he's just announced himself as a power hitter, right? Like this was just the big year that announced himself. When you look at the changes he made under the hood, he actually let the ball travel a little bit. Looked like his bat speed was up. Relatively small changes. He was a little bit more upright, which gave him a little bit more tilt, let him slug a little bit more. These could just be the recipes that he continues to follow going forward. So, I have some ear for somebody being like, hey, he's not going to regress that hard. He's still going to be the best catcher in baseball. And I want him, so I'm going to pay for him. But, be careful that you put your settings right in whatever calculator you're in and that you don't overpay. And maybe your room thinks he's going to regress to, 38 homers or whatever. And you think he's going to be more of a 42 homer hitter. There's opportunity there.
Yeah, and I think the interesting thing about the 60 homer season group, which is just amazing that Cal got in there being a catcher, especially the drop that Aaron Judge had after his 62 homer season going down to 37. That 37 homer season in 2023 was the year that he unfortunately kicked part of the concrete in the outfield wall at Dodger Stadium. That was an injury-driven decline. He was on pace for about 55 that year, so it was a pretty modest per game downturn. It was just the injury bug happened to bite him in kind of a fluky sort of way. But the thing I was thinking a lot about before the show was half of what makes Cal Raleigh's feat so impressive a year ago is doing it mostly as a catcher. And he doesn't really get days off from the lineup because he'll DH on days where he's not catching. But if you had William Contreras on your team last year, for example, Contreras was the catcher that went early, kind of a late second round pick.
He was supposed to be the full volume guy that DHs and catches.
And he still did it, but he played through a finger injury on his catching hand that pretty clearly impacted him all season long. So I just wonder if the occupational hazards of being a catcher make me a lot less likely to fully buy into sustaining the way a typical 60 home run hitter season holds up, right? That's my hesitation. I guess the other question kind of folded in here, though. We're playing mostly two catcher leagues right now. Do you like having the advantage at the position, even though in a single catcher league, the first 10, maybe 12 catchers that we're going to talk about today are all really solid players. They have high volumes of playing time. They have nice skills. The general advice in a single catcher league is it's okay to wait. There's good enough production all the way at the bottom. It's not going to burn you too bad if you get catcher 10, catcher 11, or catcher 12. The counter argument to that is, what if you just have the number one catcher and maybe he doesn't lap the field at the position the way he did last year, but what if Cal Raleigh is the best catcher by as much as the projections suggest, and by $3 or $5 you've got top end production at catcher again, and it's in the form of 38 to 40 homers and 8 to 10 steals instead of 60 and 14.
I mean, at two catcher leagues, I think the argument is pretty clear, because if you get the short end of the stick in two catcher leagues and you're starting, I don't know, I'm not picking on anybody, but let's say you waited a long time and you're starting Logan O'Hoppe and Dillon Dingler or something, what you're going to get out of them might not be, if you smush them together, as much as Cal Raleigh.
It's possible.
I mean, you're talking about clearing 50 RBI on those guys and 50 runs, and that's just a huge, it's really hard to do that. You don't normally clear 50 RBI or 50 runs off of the bottom of your position. If you talk about the best shortstop and the 12th shortstop, I don't think you clear 50 RBI and 50 runs, in that spread. So it's a large spread. The position lends itself to platoons and to sharing time, where you see even places that have two good catchers, like Atlanta has two good catchers, and Baltimore might have two good catchers, and so you run into places where you have a pretty good catcher, but he might only get 350 plate appearances this year. So getting the guys that'll have the big volume at the top, it's a definite advantage, and I want to be a part of that. But I share your idea of sort of the risk assessment of the position too. Like this is a place where you get foul balls, you get concussions, you get, that right hand, is vulnerable, to foul balls back there. And so there's all different ways you can get hurt at catcher. But I like William Contreras on a bounce back. I looked at the second half of the season. I think he was feeling pretty good. He got a mile per hour bat speed back. His exit velocities went up by 2+ miles per hour. His barrel rate went up by 3+ percentage points, and his slugging percentage was up by 100+ points. So like everything was better in the second half. And then the best part, I think, was the news that the procedure that they finally did on that finger that was hurt all year was minor. I like that word, minor procedure. It's still a surgery, I guess. It's still a surgery, but it sounds better when you say minor procedure. So I'm in on William Contreras this year, and especially with a little bit of ADP drop.
Yeah, I don't think a lot changed about his situation this year to last year. So if you believed in him last year as a possible end of round 2, early round 3 sort of pick, you're probably in closer to that pick 50 mark this year, assuming you still want to build your team around a top end sort of catcher. They were checking out that finger in early May. He had x-rays after a game in early May. That's how early in the year that was enough of a problem to get further tests. So the fact that he played as much as he did and racked up 659 plate appearances is actually somewhat surprising. Probably speaks to their overall situation at catcher and just how badly they still needed him behind the plate and in that lineup every single day. But I think we saw that downturn in power as a result of the injury, right? The lowest barrel rate of his career, 6.4%. For his career, he's at 9.4%. And I think Contreras brings more in the batting average category than a lot of other catchers do. So when you have those high volume catchers, the downside is often they don't run well. They hit a lot of fly balls. They're low BABIP sorts of players. So it might be good power, but with like 230, 240 sort of average. William Contreras is not like that at all. So I do like him quite a bit. We put him in what we're calling tier 2A. These are guys that go kind of in that pick 50 to pick 75 range. Most of the positions we're saying 50 to 100 is one tier, but a ton of catchers get lumped together here. Ben Rice still has catcher eligibility. He goes right around the same range. We talked about Michael Garcia on the third base preview as maybe one of the most unlucky players coming out of 2024. If it wasn't Garcia, maybe Ben Rice was that player. And I think the batted ball luck changed, but he also did a lot of things better to change his outcomes in 2025. Ben Rice slashed his K rate from 27% to 18.9%. His hard hit rate went through the roof. It was fine at 36.7% back in 2024, all the way to 55.8%. Now Paul Goldschmidt is gone. Playing time at first base is wide open, but he holds catcher eligibility, so he could be a catcher in fantasy and maybe play among the most at the position. I think the question I have for you is, do you think the Yankees let him play sometimes, always, or never against lefties? Never seems unlikely because he had a 104 WRC plus and a 27% K rate in that split a year ago. Maybe it depends on what else happens with the roster between now and opening day, but how are you projecting playing time for Ben Rice, and how much are you buying into that skills growth in terms of K rate and hard hit rate going in the right direction last year?
I love Ben Rice. I just, one thing that is interesting is that he added bat speed, but he did it by swinging fast more often. I think maybe he just got more comfortable. That first cup of coffee that he had basically with the Yankees didn't go so well, and he got some confidence in his second season. I think he was able to take those shots when he needed to, and he showed that he does have actually pretty good bat speed. So, when you think about bat speed, it's worth often thinking about counts and thinking about how, there's the one thing that I remember often is Max Bay once told me that bat speed is not only a process stat, but it's an outcome in and of itself. So what things go into producing bat speed are things like count, what the pitcher's doing, location in the zone, that sort of stuff. So, I think that Ben Rice just got comfortable. I love him as a bat. The interesting thing is I think that he's not a catcher. And so they're gonna maybe play him sometimes a catcher, but they have JC Escara, who's going to bat from the left side, and Austin Wells, who's going to bat from the left side. So I don't think that one of their catchers, if we're playing build a bench, like I don't think one of their catchers is going to DH very much, right? Nope. You've got Giancarlo Stanton there, who's like an everyday kind of righty DH type, who's going to be at DH. He's not going to play first base. You've got Ahmed Rosario, who's going to be on this bench, and Jose Caballero. So Ahmed Rosario, Jose Caballero, and JC Escarra, that's 3 out of your 4 bench pieces. You need an outfielder. So Oswaldo Cabrera is probably your guy. So then the question becomes, do I want to play Jason Dominguez right now, the way that the roster is right now? Do I want to play Jason Dominguez and Oswaldo Cabrera against lefties? And if I do want to do that, and I think that the answer there is maybe in an ideal situation, that's what you want to do. But what if Trent Grisham's hamstring is barking? What if Aaron Joe's toe hurts or whatever? Or Giancarlo Stanton's everything hurts. Something's hurt. So I think there'll be a lot of times where Ben Rice needs to play against lefties. I don't think it's their ideal answer, but I think that there'll be a lot of times. So I think that you're talking about something that's not quite full playing time among the other stars. However, compared to catcher, since you'll be playing him at catcher, it'll be one of the better numbers. It'll be, 550, 600 plate appearances probably.
Right. If Ben Rice hadn't caught 20 games or whatever your threshold is in your league last year and was first base only, he'd be a much riskier player for me. But because he has the catcher eligibility, I can sort of get there within this tier, even though I don't think I would take him first of the bunch. And they're all sort of, first 3 at least, are sort of clustered together. Shea Langeliers is really interesting. He carried over a significantly improved strikeout rate. We saw signs of that in spring training. It really poured it over to the regular season, not to the same magnitude. Like he barely struck out at all in spring training, but spring training pitching is, not as good as regular season pitching. Sort of obvious, right? How about a 19.7% K rate, though? Easily the lowest mark we've seen of his career. And he made that improvement without sacrificing the quality of contact. We've learned a lot about Sutter Health Park, knowing that fly balls are rewarded in big ways there. And as a result, Shea Langeliers popped as a really good top-end catcher with a nice average, too. 277 was a very pleasant surprise in that category. 31 homers, and he actually chipped in some steals, too. Most surprisingly, 19 of the 31 home runs came on the road. So Langeliers didn't even take full advantage of Sacramento as a home park within those splits. I think that, to me, provides some confidence that he can sustain a similar level of power looking ahead to 2026. And if it weren't for an oblique injury in June, the playing time volume would have been even heavier. So those counting stats and that home run total would have likely been even higher for Shea with perfect health throughout the season. But I think he had what you could call a typical health outcome sort of season for an everyday catcher in 2025.
I like what happened with Shea Langeliers last year. After the spring that he had, I got to talk to him early in the season, and I was like, "You're spreading out more in the box. You're letting the ball travel a little bit more. Your bat speed is down a little bit, but your strikeout rate is beautiful. Like, how do these all work together for you?" And he's like, it's hard to go into an off season saying I'm going to improve my strikeout rate. But he worked on his mentality, looking for a good pitch to hit, putting an A swing on it. So he still has that top end bat speed that he's always had. But now I'm not trying to hit the ball as hard as possible every time I swing. So I just think that it sounds like learning to me. It sounds like, what you do see among catchers is a big difference between their A swing and their regular. It's this position is littered with guys who have 2 and 3 mile per hour differences between their best swing and their medium swing. I think with Shea, he was like, that's the typical catcher strategy, but I just want to be a really good hitter, and I want to put this ball in play, and I think this park is going to reward it. So I'm actually going to maybe regress his strikeout rate a little bit less than the projection systems have, and I'm going to give him those gains. I'm going to say this is just what it's like to learn, to get better, to take a step forward. And the other evidence of this is it wasn't just his offense. His framing got better. His blocking got better. Like he just was better everything. And he just took a big leap forward in his age 27 season, catcher's debut later and peak later. So I'm not going to regress his batting average and his strikeout rate is hard. I'm going to say he can have like a 260, 265 average. I think he can take more advantage of that home park. I think he can still hit 30 homers. So I think he's a little sneaky there that he goes the last of this group. I think he's fairly solid. And I think there could be a little bit more in there with taking advantage of the home park. But I don't think he'll necessarily push the plate appearances any further than, the low 500s. So I don't know that they're going to maybe they will DH him a fair amount. I don't know. It's a team that's like in between trying to give everyone chances and trying to compete more. And you can see this lineup is solidifying. And as the lineup solidifies, they use him at DH less. So I think his playing time is pretty steady. But he might be safer than people think he is.
Yeah, I think the challenge overall with the position, especially at this top 2 tiers, we're going to count the Cal Raleigh solo tier with this 2A group, is you're really passing on high quality at the other positions inside the top 50. I mean, with Cal Raleigh, you're choosing him over Gunnar Henderson or over Francisco Lindor. That's a pretty big leap over Vlad Jr., especially given all the injury concerns. And that injury concern, the injury concerns just like spill over across the entire position. And I think once you get past this group, even though I like these guys collectively by skills, that's where I start to feel like there's kind of a sweet spot where I like risk, reward, production upside, like all the lines start to intersect a little bit more for me. So I almost could see, as much as I like Contreras and Langeliers, only having 1 or 2 teams where I've got one of those guys. And it's probably where some little dead zone in the snake draft scenarios happens where I don't really like anything else. And I just want to say, all right, I'm not going to worry about my catcher 1 anymore. I'm going to put that on the board and navigate the fallout that comes from passing up on a few other things, whether that be an ace, an early closer, or whatever it might be. So that's the kind of decision-making process I have when it comes to choosing these guys at their current prices. Hunter Goodman, I think, lags behind Contreras, Langeliers, and Rice for me. That's how I'd order the other 3 for what it's worth. But I thought Goodman impressed us last year with what he did behind the plate. I mean, we were worried that he was going to be part of the corner outfield first base mix. Instead, he just took over the catcher job and was good behind the plate defensively. There's some flaws in his profile. He's a high chase sort of hitter, but he did some really good things that I think can maybe stabilize his value for the next couple of seasons as their primary catcher. 18 to 31 homers he hit came on the road, 113 WRC plus against same-handed pitching. I just worry about the K rate staying somewhat high with that chase and the average kind of maxing out at what he did last season. So where are you at on Hunter Goodman right now? Slightly cheaper than the other 3 in the group, but firmly inside the top 75 of most leagues.
Yeah, he's pretty interesting because he has 83rd percentile bat speed. And if you look at this chart of catchers that Oopsie likes more, he's right near the top there. The only catcher that Oopsie likes more is Samuel Basallo. Some other catchers that Oopsie likes more than the other projection systems: JT Realmuto, Tyler Stephenson, and Austin Wells. To an extent, Oopsie is like the bat X and really likes barrels, and so barrels are a big key of this. But bat speed is in there. I did talk to Jordan Rosenblum a little bit about what happened with Oopsie's bat speed weighting last year, and he did reduce the amount of bat speed involved in his projection system. But I also wanted to update people. We've been talking about the aging of the bat speed and whether or not it looked like Tom Tango's huge aging. And Jordan wanted to point out that his is not like Tom Tango's. It's a little bit more like Steven Sutton Brown's, where batters tend to lose more like 1 to 2 miles an hour rather than this big 3 mile an hour drop off in bat speed. Anyway, fascinating talking to him about the way that his projection system works with these things. But with that bat speed, if you like Oopsie or if you just like Hunter Goodman, I think you can make the case that, hey, this is a young guy with great bat speed in a great park that projects to be at least, by composite rankings, projects to be at least Shea Langeliers and William Contreras as equal, if not superior to a couple of them, depending on which system you're using. And if that's the case, then you take the 20 picks of ADP and you take Hunter Goodman. It's a really nice way to get a top 5 catcher by anybody's metrics, but get him in at 75 instead of in the 50s or the 30s.
I think he's, for me, an easy top 10 catcher. Hunter Goodman, I think, fits into that, but I think there's a few guys that go in the bottom half of this tier, the 2B guys, we're going to call them, that I have a little more confidence in. Some of that's supporting cast. Some of that's things that are outside of Hunter Goodman's control as well. But yeah, if you're leaning on Oopsie, I think you're going to end up with some Hunter Goodman on your team, on multiple teams perhaps, if you're playing in multiple leagues this year, just based on what that system is spitting out for Goodman as a possible encore to that big breakout a season ago. But yeah, are you generally off this group in a 2-catcher league, or are you actually picking your spots here to get one of the early catchers?
In my sheet, I bold sleepers and I italicize busts as potential, just as guys that, with my different sorting processes, what I like versus the market, all this stuff. I have, in the next few tiers, I have 4 bolds. So I think it's just wait, there's a lot of good stuff coming up, and I could get a lot of other good positions first, and still get a top 10 catcher and just pay a lot less. So I've made my argument why I would take some of these guys, and I think you're right. In certain positions, there are certain draft positions where you're like, oh, what happened? There's nobody I really love right here. Then I could see you end up with a catcher in the top there. But the next tier that's coming up, a lot of good stuff.
Well, and you might be sitting in a position too where there's a few players you like, but you think there's a better chance that one or two of them will make it to your next pick, but the catcher you're looking at won't. And you kind of say, well, this is the best combination of players I can get. I think that's the other way you could end up with someone from this 2A group. You listen to us. Now we want to hear from you. We're asking you to fill out a quick survey about you and your podcast habits by going to theathletic.com/survey26. 3 lucky entries will win $100 worth of Amazon vouchers too. So whether you're a longtime listener to our show or a new one, we want your feedback. Go to theathletic.com/survey26. That's theathletic.com/survey26. That link will also be in our show description. Thank you for taking the time to fill that out. Let's get to the bottom part of Tier 2. Agustin Ramírez, Drake Baldwin, Salvador Perez, Will Smith, and Yainer Diaz. There are some very good players in this group as well, and one pretty polarizing guy right off the top. Agustin Ramírez ended up being a really nice waiver wire pickup just about everywhere last year. 21 homers, 16 steals from a catcher is a monster ad early in the season. We know they've got a prospect coming in Miami in Joe Mack. The defensive numbers behind the dish for Agustin Ramírez are brutal. He doesn't look like a catcher long term. He may not even be a catcher for all of 2026. But maybe he can get.
I want to maybe push back on this because I totally agreed with you. And then I looked at under the hood and I found some things that I was surprised by. But yet, because yes, overall, Ramírez was second to last overall in catcher defense. yes, you're right. He could totally be a DH. That could be why the Yankees traded him. But then I was like, well, he was 18th in framing. He had actually positive framing value, and that's to teams is one of the most important aspects because it's every pitch, right? Mm. Maybe it'll be less important with the advent of the automated balls and strikes, but it's still very important. So then I looked at arm strength. He's middle of the pack in arm strength, but he's terrible against the run. And I looked at it. It's because of his transition. Now I thought, well, why couldn't he coach that up? Well, then I looked at other guys that are bad at transition. Yainer Diaz, Logan O'Hoppe, Yasmani Grandal. They're all consistently bad. None of them really got better at it. So maybe transition is just one of those things he's innately bad at that. But this all sets me up to say that he's going to be not great against the run. And sometimes the run is your pitcher as much as your catcher, right? So they could just coach up their pitchers, to do something better and undo some of that. And then blocking, I think blocking is something you can learn. And he's better at the most important thing is what I'm trying to say. I think and when I think about this team, I think they're going to give him the full year at catcher.
You think they're going to give him a full year at catcher? As long as they give him 20 games at catcher, he retains eligibility for next season. So I think that's all anyone's really worried about. It's just something to think about for keeper and dynasty purposes, though. Like the long-term outlook.
It's something to think about here, too, because if he goes to first base, then it's much easier to play games with his playing time, and then his whole future outlook looks different, right? Right-handed DH who had a 91 WRC plus last year has like a whole different outlook in terms of, do we need to play this guy? Do we care about him? You know, how often do we play him? Do we platoon him? You know, that sort of stuff. Is he a DH or a first baseman? A lot of that matters on, his defense. So, and that would be playing time. So, but on the other hand, he does the stuff that's really great in terms of what he did at the plate, a 10% barrel rate, under 20% K, over 45% hard hit. The only other guys that did that other than him were Ben Rice, Sal Perez, and Drake Baldwin. I just gave you my sleeper list, but so I think it's fine to take Agustin Ramírez. Actually, I think he will have full playing time at catcher, and he will steal bases where other catchers won't steal bases. And he has a really good bat. I think he has a better bat than he showed last year, even.
Yeah, I think we're probably looking at like a floor/line from the debut. It happens a lot. You're not going to be your peak self when you arrive, typically. Some guys are, most guys aren't. But a 287 OBP is weird because Agustin Ramírez controlled the zone really well everywhere he played going through the minor leagues. So I do think there's some upward trajectory there. I think he's going to be in a prominent spot in the lineup when he plays. I'm not worried about that. I think first base and DH are enough of soggy spots in the depth chart where if he's not catching every day, he's playing somewhere every day. I mean, are you worried about a Griffin Conine, Heriberto Hernandez platoon at DH blocking Ramírez? I'm really not. I think it's just a question of whether you think the second half of last season was Ramírez going through the adjustment phase that a lot of guys are going through sometimes in year two. Like, he got promoted early enough in the year, the league got a good look at him, made some adjustments, and he cooled off considerably in the second half. Now, if he can come back and take a step forward, it wouldn't be all that surprising. I think the problem I have is, like, as much as I want to get extra categorical boosts from the catcher spot, especially in the form of 16 steals, there's a lot of different ways this could go wrong from a playing time perspective over the course of the year. If he doesn't take the step forward that we're expecting, and if they do care a lot more about catching defense overall and controlling the running game, that's where Mac becomes more of a factor for them. Mac has a plus arm. So I think the one thing that Ramírez doesn't do behind the plate is something that Mac's probably going to do immediately for that group of pitchers. And maybe that will matter more to Miami this year than it did a year ago. It's sort of an unknown for me. But then there's also the opportunity cost. You know, as much as I like a guy that hits the ball hard 47% of the time, like Ramírez does, Drake Baldwin hits the ball hard and does a lot of things well. Salvador Perez
probably a better hitter at the plate, Drake Baldwin, and a better
just an all-around better player, right? Like,
yeah.
The key difference here is that when you look at Baldwin, you see Sean Murphy's still there. Murphy is still a credible enough backup to chew up some playing time. And you have to ask yourself, how are they going to handle DH with Marcell Ozuna gone? Are they going to rotate it with a bunch of different guys? Are they going to use their two catchers a lot? I mean, there's a few ways that could go, not necessarily in Baldwin's control. So you're asking different types of playing time questions for just about everybody in this group. I mean, Salvador Perez, he's going to be 36 in May. Eventually, age becomes a problem. It hasn't really been a major problem for him yet. But I think what gets kind of lost sometimes with Salvador Perez is that he is brutal on the base paths. And the supporting cast as a whole hasn't been great either, which chews away at least one category. Look at his runs scored compared to other catchers. Even though RBIs are there.
2 straight years. He has 58 and 54 runs the last 2 years. That's amazing.
And he's got 27 and 30 homers when he's doing that, right? So it's like, it's a weird way to leak some value. So you kind of have that plus some batting average downside potential.
Oh, but he's beautiful overall. The only bad number solid. I see, the only bad number I see on this list is 35. That's his age. There's always just a chance that he just gets hurt. He, misses like a whole season or something, like ACL or something like that. I mean, he's just at that age where something bad, real bad could happen. But in terms of, he's been a 650 plate appearance guy for 3 out of the last 5 seasons, basically. And that just gives him all this nice volume. Yes, 58 runs from a catcher is not great, but everything else is going to be really, really good. And so if you look at, what players the projections like better than the market, Sal Perez is number 1, I think. Nope, he's number 4, but he's among the if you're talking about one catcher leagues, he's the guy. He's the guy. You should just wait and take Sal Perez in one catcher leagues. It's sort of how I feel.
Yeah, projections being ahead of guys that are the 20th or 30th catchers by ADP. Look, if ADP has him 8th and projections have him 3rd, there's an opportunity there. So
yeah,
I'm just curious though. When you look at this group, you have the reigning NL Rookie of the Year in Baldwin. You have a guy that's an all-time great for the Royals that still between first base, DH, and how much he catches can play a ton if his body holds up. And that's even with a prospect, Carter Jensen, getting into the mix, right? Because between Jensen, Vinny Pasquantino, and Salvador Perez, that's 3 spots for 3 players. All 3 of those guys could be really important to the Royals being a good enough offense to hang around, at least as a wild card team this year. So I could see all 3 being prioritized, even if they're mixing and matching and rotating around a little bit defensively. It's just
this chart.
How do you want to go?
Yeah, this chart ends at Sal Perez at a 5-point difference, where he's ranked 3rd by the projections and 8th by ADP, and the next 3 players on that list are Adley, Rutschman, Yainer, Diaz, and Will Smith.
Yep.
So this almost this entire tier is full of Sal Perez is a 5-point difference. Will Smith is the 6th catcher by projections. He was 7th last year. I think that was his worst year in terms of playing time for Will Smith. And I don't know that necessarily pushes playing time a lot going forward, but he also had a pretty big injury, missed some time. He could play more this year and get up into 6 pretty easily. He's going as the 9th catcher. Yainer Diaz is rated 7th by composite projections, and he's 10th. He's going 10th in the market. So, I think there's an opportunity here. Adley Rutschman, nobody really likes him, but he's a switch hitter that has a good sense of what's happening at the zone. He knows what's going on in the zone, and the steamer projection for Adley Rutschman is for a 255 average and 17 homers. If you just waited forever in your 12-team league and Adley Rutschman was your catcher, you could literally take him. I think in a 12-team league, there's going to be a lot of them where you just take him in the last round or one of the last rounds, and then you can look at the waiver wire at all the rest of the guys we're about to talk about, and you'll know who you replace Adley Rutschman with if it doesn't work out. You just saw one of them on the last list, Ryan Jeffers. Love that dude. Projects as the 13th best catcher. He's projects to hit 20 homers. He's probably not going to get drafted in a 12-teamer. So just remember Ryan Jeffers in case Adley Rutschman doesn't work out.
Well, it's just amazing to me that part of the Baldwin breakout was Sean Murphy being hurt, and we learned that he was playing with a labrum tear in his hip, which was really a long-term problem that he was just fighting through. Pretty big surgery to come back from, especially for a catcher, so they can kind of ease him in as a result of having Baldwin. You do wonder if coming off of that, if Murphy eventually looks more like the guy he was 2+ years ago than the guy he's been trying to gut it out and play through that. If that's the case, then that's sort of your limiting factor for the Baldwin playing time. But I think when I look at this entire group, factoring in age, how good these lineups are, Smith and Baldwin are the 2 that pop. I'm probably still more likely to take Smith over Baldwin straight up, which is a little off ADP, but it's the per game production
floor. And it's
Will
Smith
so
is
safe.
A really established guy, yeah.
And especially now, of course, if you're playing in a league with daily moves, the per game productions for Will Smith, that's up to the top part of this tier. I think you could argue he's catcher 2 on a per game basis. That's within his range of outcomes. So I really like Will Smith a lot from this group, and I think Baldwin's the close second. Sal, it's kind of a classic. I'd rather be a year early than a year late on things unraveling on him. I hope it doesn't unravel on him. I hope Sal Perez hits 30 homers and hits 250 and is a Kansas City Royal forever. Hope he's playing at 45 and playing like this. I know that's not going to happen, but I see just that collapse possibility on the horizon, even though the underlying numbers really aren't showing us a lot of decline for him just yet.
There's just a real quick note here. ATC projections are out, and it just gives you a chance to look at how the spread of the best projection systems out there. And like for Agustin Ramírez, you go from 106 from Steamer, WRC plus, so clearly above average player, to the Bat X saying he's 98, he's a below average player. In terms of the projection systems, I'm just sort of amazed that Adley Rutschman, who I don't think anybody wants, and is going to be, I think considered bust by a lot of people, and had 91 WRC plus last year. The projection system range is from 109 from ATC to 116 from Oopsie. So they actually all agree that Adley Rutschman is going to be a good hitter this year. Sometimes you just take a guy because you're like, well, okay, there's not a projection system that says it's a bad move.
He's just been hurt for the better part of 2 years, which it was both obliques last year. It was that foul ball that hit him in the wrist in June of 2024. Like first half numbers looked a lot better than second half numbers that year. The whole situation in Baltimore is complicated on the depth chart because they have another young catcher, Samuel Basallo, who came up last year. They extended him already. He can play some first base or DH. Adley could be a little bit in the DH mix, but they have so many bats right now that with full health across the board, which seems unlikely, someone has to lose playing time eventually, right? Like they can't all play every single day. Maybe it's the sort of thing that works itself out. But I've been looking at Rutschman as an acceptable catcher one in a 2-catcher league if things just break in a way where you don't get the guys you want that go a little bit earlier. I like him more than Yainer Diaz. I think Yainer Diaz has proven to be pretty consistent with an approach that you and I ordinarily aren't that excited about. I mean, it's a very aggressive chase outside the zone, really just swing a lot sort of approach. But 20 homer power looks real. He's kept the K rate under 20% now over 3 seasons in the big leagues. I think we kind of saw the downside of the batting average last year at 256, so he can be good in that category, give you everything you need, at least in terms of homers, RBIs, maybe even the runs scored count won't be bad either because I don't really see anybody pushing him for playing time in the short term. So I don't love Yainer Diaz, but I think where he's being drafted, he fits just fine on rosters at that price.
Yeah, there's an interesting spread in his ADP between the minimum and the maximum. I guess it's usually around 30 picks, but his is between 100 and 130, which seems like I just think he's a guy you can wait on and you can pick. Like I think there's certain rooms that'll just look at that chase rate, look at that approach, and that'll leave them cold. And if you get him at that closer to that 130 range, I do think he's maybe a little bit safer in terms of the fantasy numbers that are out there than Rutschman, because you could just say, well, Rutschman was so bad last year. You could say, I think he's a little bit safer in terms of just the fantasy numbers as opposed to how good of a player he is numbers like WRC plus. Just because he didn't have a great season last year, but he still hit the 20 homers and still had a 256 average. Like he still was a valuable catcher, whereas Rutschman, played through these injuries and was not a valuable catcher. So, if the room doesn't like Yainer Diaz, then jump in. And I've definitely been in situations like this. I have Yainer Diaz in certain places, like in keeper leagues, where it's just like nobody else wanted him, and so I'm like, I'm fine with him. But he isn't a great catcher as well when it comes to defense and calling and things like that. So there's always some risk at some point that the team moves off him. But at 27, they seem pretty ensconced with him there. I think he's a slightly safer catcher one than Rutschman. And so if he falls to that 130 spot, I'd been waiting to take Rutschman, I might just take Yainer Diaz there.
I think it's one of those things where I'm not as sad missing out on Diaz because of the presence of Rutschman and a couple other tier 3 catchers. This group includes Rutschman, Alejandro, Kirk, Gabriel, Moreno, Francisco Alvarez, the aforementioned Samuel Basallo, Kyle Teel, and Carter Jensen. So we're talking like pick 140 or so by ADP right now. Basically down to like that 190, 200 sort of range. So 7 players in the group. I mentioned the injuries before with Rutschman. I just think with health, he controls the zone so well. Even if the bounce back is a rebound to the 2024 season, that'll play. I mean, that was 19 homers, 79 RBIs, 68 runs scored. He did it in 638 plate appearances. I think he'll have to do it with less playing time, but maybe being behind the plate a little less will actually keep him fresh and help him get that bat back closer to what we saw to begin his career. It's just the unfortunate nowhere but down so far since arriving. It was a 134 WRC plus his rookie season, down to 126, down to 103, and down to 91. But I think it's a health-related early sort of decline so far for Rutschman.
So I have a question for you. In the ADP chart, if the team name shows up, is that the team that did the min pick?
No, it's the team that's in the draft that you were last looking at when you clicked on the ADP report.
Oh, okay. I was like, did I create the min pick for Gabriel Moreno? I mean, I just want to, give a shout out to Moreno. I think that one thing that's interesting about him is that he makes that contact. He goes 175. I think if you did something where you got two guys out of this tier, you might have to spend a little bit extra on your second catcher, but I think you would stay off of that floor. I don't think anybody in this tier is really on the floor. Moreno's, contact ability is good, but what I also did last year is he started swinging, doing his A swings more often. And thanks to Pep Talk in the Discord, we have this chart here, which shows, what I was talking about earlier, that catcher is a position where people, take their A swings. And the difference between so the first category here is a swing boost, and the difference between the median player in baseball's regular swing and their A swing is about 1.1 miles per hour. So everybody who's looking at this list has a double that as their boost. Kyle Teel has the biggest boost, but Adley Rutschman has a big one. Ryan Jeffers, Shea Langeliers still has a big one, even though he kind of calmed down that approach. And Gabriel Moreno. So Gabriel Moreno has a 71 mile an hour bat speed in his advantage counts. He had a 1200 OPS in those counts. So what I see with Moreno is he swung fast more often last year, and retained his strikeout rate basically the same, and got these power gains. So, I think he'll keep the power gains, in other words. I think that next year we're going to see the first double-digit homer season from him, and that sounds like faint praise, but we are talking about two catcher leagues here, and he is probably going to hit 280. So you got 280, 12 homers. It's a weird thing to slot into your lineup, and you're like, how does that advance? It doesn't advance my homer needs. Remember, batting average still matters, and so Gabriel Moreno. I think, there's even a chance he hits 15 homers, and then you've got a real nice find on you. So this is a guy who's going as the 13th catcher, 14th catcher, and I think he might join the top 10.
I think he's really similar to his former organization mate from a roto perspective. It's Alejandro Kirk, right? I mean, excellent defense fuels that playing time. We saw 506 plate appearances during the regular season from Kirk. It's in a pretty meaty spot in that Jays lineup too. They can put plenty of runs on the board, so you get that average with the run production. It's not crazy power. It's 15 homer power last year. That's probably at the upper bound of what you'd expect given the way he swings the bat and his approach. But I think you could look at those guys as almost 1A, 1B options on it. You could probably just make them your two catchers if you wait at the position, do well in average, do fine in counting stats, end up pretty happy with what you spend at the position relative to what you actually get. The Moreno note I had too, he had a fractured finger last year that cost him 2 months. So the breakout on the back of the baseball card or on the Fangraphs page, it looks a little obscured. Looks at the counting stats, didn't quite pop, but hard hit rate above 40% for the third consecutive season. And he hit the ball in the air more often. So I think, there's some exciting changes happening there. We've talked about Arizona as a lineup that has exceeded expectations time and time again, really, I think going back 3 years now. Part of how they're going to get there, if they do it again in 2026, is Moreno being healthy and doing some of the things we saw a year ago. I do think it's interesting, Ivan Herrera not on the Cryon, because in leagues that require 20 games played to be eligible, he did not catch enough to be a catcher. But in leagues with lower thresholds, he may still retain catcher eligibility. He would go right around this range in this tier. Very interesting player, especially if he's catcher eligible. I think the Cardinals are going to find ways to get him playing time. I'm just curious to see how the pieces still come together. It feels like they have to still move Brendan Donovan to get everybody they want to have, that younger core in the lineup all together. But all that's to say, if Ivan Herrera is still catcher eligible in your league, I think I would lump him in to this Rutschman, Kirk, Moreno cluster and be pretty happy with him as one of my catchers.
Yeah, I don't want to let Francisco Alvarez go by without any mention. I think what I like about him is that I think he refound his identity. I think he might have gotten some bad advice at some point where he was all focused on going the other way and went away from what made him who he was, which is pull power. Then what you saw last year was a little bit of a return to that pull power, 54% hard hit, 12% barrel rate. It's not a guy, he's going to strike out, but he's going to make the most of his balls in play. And so, next year, you look at somebody like Oopsie's projections, 240 with 21 homers from where he's going. It's really nice. Right now, the DH situation in the Mets organization is a little bit up in the air. There's a little bit of a depth chart, soft depth chart here. Maybe Francisco Alvarez gets a few games at DH and pushes that plate appearance number up. I mean, if Mark Vientos is as bad as he was last year, DFA, small trade, something like that could happen. He could still get traded out of there, and they could prefer to use DH as a place where Soto gets to rest his legs sometimes and Alvarez gets to play some. So, I think there's a chance there that he could even have a 25 homer season with a little bit extra playing time.
Yeah, I like Alvarez a lot. He's had a couple of injuries, 2 last year, a fractured finger, or I should say a hand fracture, and then a torn UCL in his thumb that required some off-season surgery. I'm with you on the approach. I think he got kind of caught. I believe JD Martinez was the inspiration for him trying to be more of an all-fields hitter, which in a vacuum is not a bad idea as long as it doesn't cost you the things you do well. And Francisco Alvarez as a prospect had top-end bat speed, top-end exit velocities. Go out there and mash, dude. And the other thing that was interesting about his season last year, I think the injuries had a factor in this too, is just the defense slipped. But I don't really think he's a bad defender. I think he showed us a level earlier in his career that exceeded expectations. I think he's at least an average defender behind the plate with a chance to be above average for the next couple of seasons. So high volume potential if you can avoid the injury bug, and around all the stuff. I mean, he went down to AAA for a little while last year. Francisco Alvarez had his best season as a big league catcher by WRC plus last year, 124 WRC plus. I think there is a huge drop off in terms of the catchers I really like for short term versus everybody else right there. Like, to me, if the queue starts getting dried up and Alvarez is like the last one sitting out there and you don't have your first catcher yet in a 2-catcher league, you got to go ahead and pull the cord and actually take Alvarez as catcher 1, because there's a lot of questions that start to emerge in the pool. Even though long-term, look, like in keeper and dynasty leagues, Sammy Basallo, very interesting. Kyle Teel, very interesting. Carter Jensen, I think very interesting as well. Of the 3 younger guys in this group, who are you most likely to end up with in a redraft league for 2026?
I'm actually a little bit out on this tier.
The bottom part of the tier?
Yes, this like mini little tier that we've created, this sort of younger. Each of them has competition for their position. Sammy Basallo's on the same team as Adley Rutschman, and they got a lot of hitters this offseason. They don't have to play Sammy Basallo, if he's not a catcher. You know what I mean? In terms of if he's not hitting that, he could be back in the minors next year. I mean, there's a definite risk of that. As much as we like a lot of the things he did in terms of hitting the ball hard and making contact, really good combination there. Kyle Teel has Edgar Carrera on the same team, another high value prospect. Now, I think of the 3 here, his playing time is the safest. So if you made me choose between Basallo, Teel, and Jensen, I'm going to take Teel. Another thing that's kind of fun is that Kyle Teel shows up on the list of catchers that Steamer likes better. And at the top there's William Contreras and Yainer Diaz. But then also Kyle Teel shows up as this list as a $6 catcher in 2-catcher leagues. If you're going by Steamer. And I think the reason why is that he doesn't really have that great bat speed, but he did show up on the, big A swing boost. I think he has a pretty good feel for catching. So, I mean, for hitting. So I'm going to take Teel based on sort of not the bat speed, not the high-end barrel rates, not the high-end hard hit rates, but more on, hey, look at that chase rate. Look at the decisions around the plate for Kyle Teel. Look at the 12.5% walk rate and the 18 and 20% walk rates he put up in the minors. So like this guy, I think, has a great sense of where the plate is. He may not hit 25, 30 homers, but he may stay in that sort of 270, 275 with, 15 homer range. He stole some actual bases. So if you're making me choose, I'm going to take Teel, but I just wanted to point out that for all three of these, including Carter Jensen, I mean, yes, he's going to catch and he's going to be in the big leagues, but they still catch Salvador Perez. And so I think the plate appearance number for Carter Jensen, I think, is really hard to nail down. I mean, you have ATC saying 344. Steamer says 308 plate appearances for Carter Jensen. If he only gets 308 plate appearances, he's going to be on the deep end, the back end. He's not going to be worth where he goes. Oopsies is 401. So I think there's just the plate appearance number for me for Carter Jensen is just all over the place.
Yeah, I can see the floor being the safest with Teel, and that being the reason you'd take him in a redraft league for sure. I think if you want the combination of floor and ceiling in the immediate future, Jensen's the guy. And then if you're talking about keeper dynasty, who's the best hitter of the trio looking 3 to 5 years out, I think it's Basallo. Like, it's just weird that each one of them has something different they bring to the table. I think my faith here is just seeing how they've slowly moved Sal's playing time more into the first base DH mix, and some of that's the health of Vinny Pasquantino. I mean, if Pasquantino's healthy, he plays every single day. First base, little DH. Sal's going to catch half to 2/3 of the time. Carter Jensen's the clear backup on the depth chart right now, but there's 3 guys for 3 spots. Like, who else is in their DH mix? Like, is Jack Caglione going to DH? Probably not. He's probably the right fielder, right? So I don't really see anybody else.
He was a first baseman coming up. So if they, if they start to think, oh, he's not that great out there, but the bat is great, then, I do think there's some risk there. Here, it's a good point to point out that the Royals don't have a lot of extra hitters.
So they just don't have enough right now where I'm not worried about
Jonathan India gonna push, Carter Jensen out off the plate by DHing. That's what Fangraph says right now.
Like, the range of outcomes is Jensen struggles and gets optioned back down, and some veteran is the backup catcher, and maybe he plays half the season in the big leagues with that demotion, versus like he's this year's Drake Baldwin in the AL. Like, that could happen. So I kind of like Jensen where he's going right now. I think you have to draft a third catcher in a 2-catcher league, just because if the wheels fall off, you might be in a really bad spot, or just be ready to play the waiver wire accordingly in a situation like that. But interesting group. You got to make some decisions ahead of time. And the Orioles team preview, if they don't trade a hitter for a pitcher between now and the Orioles team preview, parsing through how that playing time is going to work is going to be a real challenge for us. So looking forward to that. Let's get into Tier 4. We better pick up the pace. We are slow through this catcher preview. Catchers don't run that well as a group, so that explains why we're so slow through this group. ADP Tier 4, we're outside the top 200 overall, or at least right on that border with a couple of these guys. We've got JT Realmuto, Dillon Dingler, Austin Wells, Tyler Stephenson, and Logan O'Hoppe. Realmuto fresh off a 3-year deal here in January, which sets him up to probably retire with the Phillies at the end of that deal. I would assume that carries him to the very end of his big league career. There's a lot of things he still does well, handles the pitching staff well, still passable at the plate, even though we're seeing reasonable age-driven decline at this stage. 2025 marked the first time since 2021 that Realmuto didn't have a double-digit barrel rate. Still 8 for 10, though, as a base stealer. Did pop 12 homers and managed to rack up 550 plate appearances. Are we okay if we just knock 50 plate appearances off of last year and assume something close to a full re-rack for Realmuto?
I'm okay with that. I'm all over that one. I think Realmuto is undervalued in terms of what he did last year and what it was worth. It wasn't a great season for him, but he was still among catchers. Where is he? Why is he? Oh, it was worse
okay.
than I thought.
I can't find him. Oh, no.
Yeah, no. It was way worse than I thought. Where is he?
18th by ADP at the position right now.
He was still a 13th best catcher last year in 2 catcher leagues. He was still worth $10, JT Realmuto. And like, he still stole 8 bases and he's projected to steal 6 to 8 bases. I mean, if I read to you the composite projection is basically 250, 14 homers, and 7 stolen bases. I mean, come on. That gets a lot worse than that. I'm in on JT Realmuto, and I'm gonna take him over some of those exciting young players that we were all excited about in the last mini tier. Especially if you give me some picks.
Yeah, I know. I think if you're also just considering the downside of needing to replace a catcher spot in season in a 2 catcher league, it's hard. It's hardly optimal. So yeah, there's a perfectly fine case for Realmuto where he goes. I'm amazed that Oopsie likes him more than Steamer, just because Steamer, I always associate Steamer as the projection system that likes aging players the most. And in this case, Oopsie's actually a little more bullish on Realmuto.
Jordan was talking about that with me, and he said that if you are looking at an Oopsie projection that you think has aged someone harder, so Jose Ramírez or Jose Altuve or some of the ones that come to mind where Oopsie has the worst projection, he said it's not necessarily because of aging curves. He says it's probably because of the input of barrel. Look at the barrel rates on these guys. So the only one that I could really find where Oopsie was the harshest and the barrel rate was good was George Springer. So I don't know what was going on there. Maybe he just regressed the barrel rate harder. He said regression amount, again, is one of the biggest things that changes from projection system to projection system. But the other last thing I want to say about JT Realmuto, and I'm trying to speed up a little bit, is because he has these crazy incentives. He gets $2 million if he gets selected to the All-Star team. You know, he has all these incentives that can add up to like $5 million a year. So, listen, does he need that money to be incentivized to do those things? Maybe not, but it is another level of incentivization. And this is a guy that could be a borderline Hall of Famer that just had his first like bad year, basically. It was his first year with a sub 100 WRC plus. Players like that often, and he was a free agent, players like that often have a bit of a wake up call and, do some stuff in the offseason they don't normally do. So, I could see JT Realmuto bouncing back. Plus, if you're in a draft and hold, you're going to take Basallo and be like, oh, I know how many plate appearances I'm getting for this season. Or you can take JT Realmuto and be like, I'm pretty sure I know how many plate appearances I'm getting this season.
Yeah, I think your format really drives that decision too. Like, how much floor do you need versus how much ceiling and risk can you take on? Realmuto looks solid where he's going right now. The reunion with the Phillies always made sense. Good for him getting 3 years, though. I was not expecting that many years for his deal coming out of free agency. Dillon Dingler got the K rate down to 23.5%. That was a problem when he debuted in 2024, but it was a small sample. The lack of walks puts a lot of pressure short term on him to keep that K rate down. He was pretty patient, though, on his way through the minors. So I don't know if 4.9% we saw last year is where the walk rate actually settles in. He's a great defender. He's got enough power to get to double-digit homers with Comerica for half of his games. He almost looks like he's slightly undervalued because he's not a prospect anymore. Like that happens sometimes. You show up and you play well, and we think, oh, we know what Dillon Dingler is going to do, so let's put him behind some of these guys that we haven't seen for a full season yet.
I'm a pass mostly on Dingler. I just see the swing and miss problems in the minor leagues, and I think those are going to come back for him. He also had a 345 batting average on balls in play last year. For catchers, that's often 280 is the norm. And across the league, it's more 290, 295. So I think he got a little lucky there. He doesn't have a corresponding. I mean, he has a decent hard hit rate, but we've talked in the Discord about how hard hit rate can be a little bit deceiving because balls just at 95 miles an hour don't have that great outcomes. The better outcomes really come at 100 plus. There should be a super hard hit rate. But his barrel rate is okay. It's a tough home park. I could really see him just being one of those 230, 11 homer hitting catchers where, man, there's like 5 of those every year. And I don't know why you would ever pay for up for any of them. I think you just put them all in a box and, blindfold yourself and take a guy at that point.
I mean, I think passable as a catcher 2 is ideal. I don't know if there's a ton of extra ceiling here, but I like what we saw. A really good defender, really good real life player at a minimum that the Tigers have as they move forward and try to get back into the postseason in 2026. But
if you're looking for a bat in this tier that's young and has more upside, I think, and is also a pretty good defender in his own right and will play all the time, I like Austin Wells better. I think the quality of contact is better. I think the strikeout rate is more likely to go in the other direction, like get better going forward. And he had a 245 BABIP. So I just think it's sort of buying guys at different points. I'm really, actually, honestly, if before I prepared for this, if you asked me to see like Austin Wells and Dillon Dingler, where their ADPs were and where they were being taken, I would have said Wells was 50 points clear of Dingler.
Yeah, I guess the big difference for me is like Wells could take more advantage of Yankee Stadium and actually be like a 25 to 30 homer guy, whereas Dingler, I feel like, kind of tops out in the high teens given his home park. So that's where I think you get a little more ceiling from Austin Wells. I share your view that he's probably a little underrated within this tier. Tyler Stephenson, I think I'm closing in on the point where I'm just not expecting more, but it's hard to give up on him coming off a year where you got the barrel rate up to 14.4% and the hard hit rate went with it, 49.2. They usually go together. It's just weird because he had some injuries and the K rate got up over 33%. It's a lot of swing and miss. Had an early season stint on the IL with an oblique injury, had a later season fractured left thumb that ended his season. I mean, I think the Reds are even at this point too. Stevenson should be in his last year of ARB before he hits free agency. Are you in or out on Tyler Stephenson as a catcher 2 at this price?
Well, the book used to be, Tyler Stephenson great because of the park, and he has a good strikeout rate, so he'll have a decent average for a catcher. And then he kind of torpedoed that, and he did that to get more power. He did go and get the ball more out in front, and so I think that that was something he did on purpose, and it did lead to the better barrel rates. But if he's going to go down to the 230-15 group, which that's exactly where his projection is. I mean, it's laughable to me sometimes how there's like 4 or 5 catches a year that are just 230-15 guys. I mean, I think he's in that group now because this is what he's chosen to do. He's gone for the power. It might be okay for his overall, value to his team, and it might be good for his free agency to just hit for more power. But the thing that I used to like about him was, I think the batting average would be better than group. So Stephenson, Dingler on my pass list on this one. Realmuto and Wells, I think it's O'Hoppe that I think is really the hardest for me to figure out in this group because he's not a great catcher. So he has some of those defensive issues that we talked about with Agustin Ramírez, and he's not going to hit well enough to be a DH, I think, even on a team like this. But he has also averaged around 18 homers a year for the last 3 years. He's also, a little bit younger than some of the guys on this list at 25. So could he take a step forward? What would look like a step forward for you for Logan O'Hoppe? I guess it's cutting the strikeout rate, but retaining the quality of contact because his barrel rates are really great.
I think a step forward for me would just be looking like a better defensive catcher because so much more about his profile remains interesting to me if he can stay behind the plate. But he was really caught in between approaches. It was a mess for him last year. I think organizationally speaking, there's always a question as to whether or not the Angels can get the absolute most out of any player. And just seeing the struggles of O'Hoppe last year in that facet was kind of eye-opening. The numbers, again, the metrics were not bad defensively in 2024. They're actually kind of good. So I don't know why it spiraled on him so badly. I guess the main thing would be, just a little less swing and miss at the plate. Like cut that down just a little bit. And that pushes him back to that like 240s sort of floor. And maybe has a little bit room for more in that category if the K rate comes down to, say, 25%. But he's lived right around 30% now over the last 2 seasons.
I once asked Jason Ochart, who is the director of hitting, or I don't even know what his title is anymore, but he's the hitting guy with the Boston Red Sox, the top hitting guy. I asked him, can you train for contact? And, can you, because it's easier to think of weighted bats and, swing shape and all this stuff for power, but what can you do to train for contact? And he goes, absolutely. You should talk to Logan O'Hoppe about this. This is exactly what we did in the minor leagues. And what you see, if you look at his minor league projection for Logan O'Hoppe, is an improvement in strikeout rate that has now gone the other way. So now that he can't train with with Jason Ochart and maybe some of those he needs to return to some of those training methods. But that's in there because I know from Logan O'Hoppe, I know that he has 3 notebooks. He has a catching notebook, a pitcher notebook, and a hitting notebook, and he keeps notes every day. Maybe that does lead to what you're talking about, though, getting caught in between, right? Like you have so many things in your notebooks, you're kind of like, ooh, this. I don't know. But I do think it speaks to like this is a driven dude that is taking copious notes, that is, in the most forward-thinking places in terms of development and trying to get the most out of what he's got. That's why he has great barrel rates and great hard hit rates and good bat speed, is because he's in those places. But maybe he takes the focus this offseason towards strikeout rate and returns back to where you're saying. So I think in terms of breakout potential, O'Hoppe's got to be there with Wells, right? In terms of floor, Realmuto's probably got the best with Wells second. So that's why I like Wells maybe the best out of the tier, is that he's got floor and breakout potential. But in terms of breakout potential, I think we both say maybe Logan O'Hoppe's second in this tier.
Yeah, I think it's still there. Because you hit the ball that hard, good things can absolutely happen. And there's not enough pressure on him, organizationally speaking, to say that he's going to lose a lot of time behind the plate. Travis d'Arnaud is a very old backup at this point. You just can't expect him to take a much larger share of playing time away from Logan O'Hoppe at this point. Tier 5, a little bit small, kind of the pick 250 range, down to about pick 300, give or take. It's Ryan Jeffers, Carlos Narváez, Bo Naylor, and Carson Kelly. I like Jeffers a lot until the Twins brought in Victor Caratini, and now I just think Jeffers is fine. Like, instead of being the clear-cut guy I must have from this group, now I'm just a little worried about the playing time.
Yeah, Caratini did have a 104 WRC plus last year, but he's 32, and I think part of why they signed him is they signed him to a 2-year deal. It's a little bit of safety once Jeffers leaves. And in terms of upside, I think what you do as a team when you sign a veteran like that is, hey, you're saying like Jeffers is in your walk year. Like if you play to your best abilities, you'll get the playing time. We don't need to get Caratini in there as often as possible. And if you do fall off, then we're going to start transitioning to Caratini because he'll be there next year. So I guess what it does for me is I don't think it actually affects Jeffers' ceiling that much, but it does affect the floor and where Jeffers is going, which is sort of a back end catcher 2, top end catcher 3. I feel like some people really want floor there, right? And one of the guys I really like for floor in this area is Danny Jansen, because I think with Kyle Higashioka's age, I think he's going to play a lot. I think Carson Kelly is a really good pick for floor, just because I think he's going to play. I know that last year had a couple months that were just amazing months and kind of led to a late career breakout. And he might just regress off of all that. But I think he's pretty safe unless, Miguel Amaya really takes a step forward and bypasses him. In terms of ceiling, I think Bo Naylor is a guy that sticks out for me in this tier, because Bo Naylor is a guy who actually has foot speed and he actually has bat speed, and he last year had a 10% barrel rate and 38% hard hit rate, and he only had a 24% strikeout rate. So like if you look at the process stats for him, he hit 50% of his balls in the air. Like that will affect your batting average on balls in play, because the batting average on balls in play and fly balls is lower just generally. But a 222 BABIP for Bo Naylor, I think, is the one thing that could regress easily when he doesn't change anything about what he does under the hood, and he just regresses there, and all of a sudden he's in that 230-15 club, but he might be 18 and he might have 3 to 5 steals. So there's a little bit extra to Bo Naylor that I think makes him stand out in this group.
He turns 26 in February, and Bo Naylor is a good defender. That should drive the playing time. You're right about those kind of key, those macro indicators getting better. He's shown an ability to steal a few bases in the past too. We're talking earlier about Ben Rice being someone that not only was unlucky, but also added some quality of contact from 24 to 25. Maybe Bo Naylor could do something like that, hit the ball a little bit harder, unlock a little more power, and then also have more normal luck on balls in play. So where he's going, I think Bo Naylor makes a lot of sense to me. There's a few things he could have go right, and it could be fine. I would definitely think of him a lot more as a catcher 2 to begin the season than somebody that in a single catcher league would be just I'm just going to wait and take the very last guy that gets drafted at the position. I think that might be pushing it a little too far, at least initially, without some sort of evidence of better quality of contact. Narváez, had a nice year for the Red Sox last year. I think I saw someone in the Discord wondering if Connor Wong is actually still more of a threat to his playing time, that maybe there could be some kind of bounce back from Wong just to wrestle away a share of the playing time. I guess that's possible. But I think this is one of those points where you start looking at the alternatives further down. They're not that different than the guys you're looking at. I mean, it's just a matter of who wins a job in some cases. Both Nats catchers go beyond pick 300. Harry Ford, who they acquired from Seattle, and Keibert Ruiz, who's been a pretty big disappointment since they acquired him from the Dodgers and gave him that contract extension. Like, if one of those guys emerges to be the primary catcher for the Nats, they might end up being really solid for catcher 2 purposes just because of the playing time they get. Edgar Caro goes in this range. If the White Sox continue to use Teel and Caro in the lineup together on a regular basis all year, Caro ends up being okay as a second catcher. But I do think the problem for Edgar Caro right now, Teel is the more convincing hitter by floor and probably by ceiling. So that could skew the playing time.
And the defensive metrics weren't great for Carrera. I was surprised by that.
Yeah, so like if they use someone else as the DH, as they continue to find players they like, then Caro's playing time looks more like that of a backup, right? So that's sort of the game you start to play with a lot of the catchers that go this late. You mentioned Danny Jansen maybe being a little undervalued for 2-catcher leagues. San Diego still has a kind of a mess behind the plate, so maybe Freddie Fermin just plays a lot.
Fermin was on a list earlier.
Which one did he pop on?
I forget. It was I think the market, the projections like him better than the market. My comp projections have him. He's a massive value. My comp projections have him 25th. He goes 31st. So,
yeah. I mean, yeah, Naylor and Fermin both kind of stand out in that regard. Jeffers, I
like Fermin and Naylor in that group. And I just want to give a little quick shout out to Sean Murphy. He did hit 16 homers last year, and this is a guy that in Oakland was a premier catcher. If this was something that's been bothering him from 2 years, like what if he gets back up to 230, 240? I mean, then he is a 230-15 guy, but you also got him a lot later, and he might replace somebody that didn't work out at the top, So I think Sean Murphy is a great third catcher to pick up because he'll play. I think his defense is really good. Maybe playing less, keeps the batting average higher, and, he does have thump. So I think it's too early to put Sean Murphy in a grave. So I think Sean Murphy is a good pick down here.
If you're just chasing the playing time, I think Patrick Bailey still plays a ton for the Giants as long as he's healthy. He's the guy because of his glove. It's nothing flashy with the bat, but you could do a lot worse if just collecting volume in a really deep league is your ultimate goal at the catcher position. Thinking about this group overall, beyond 300, whether it's deep league options you like or a prospect, is anybody else you're interested in at the catcher position?
I am still interested. Like if we're talking our sleeper at the catcher position, for me, it's still Ryan Jeffers. I think he is a superior hitter to Victor Caratini. I think he is going to hit 20 homers this year and have like a 240 average and be a clear catcher 2. If you're making me pick somebody, that is irrelevant in 12 catcher leagues, then I'm just going to take Will Smith because I think there's nothing wrong with him. I think he's just like the perfect oatmeal catcher, and you can take him pretty late. And so those are my 2 sleepers, depending on the size of your league.
Yeah, I like those calls quite a bit. I think in terms of an undervalued catcher, I hate to call him a sleeper because everyone knows who he is at this point. I love Adley Rutschman where he's going. I just think the floor is going to be there. I like that Orioles lineup a lot. Their embarrassment of riches in terms of depth should lead to good things in terms of counting stats across the board. So I'm falling for it. I'm buying into an Orioles collective bounce back in 2026. And I just think health for Adley Rutschman is going to go a long way towards getting him back within the top 10, probably within the top 7 or so at the position. I think the bust for me, the guy that I'm just staying away from, is Agustin Ramírez. You made compelling points about the framing not being that bad, but not controlling the run game. I think that's going to be a little bit of a problem. Playing time should be fine. I think the thing that Ramírez struggled with last year, and again, as you look at projections, better days are likely ahead. He was a 91 WRC plus. I have a hard time taking a player with a 287 OBP over 585 plate appearances. I have a hard time taking that player in the first 5 or 6 rounds, right? Because I'm passing on guys that have better track records, no uncertainty around their playing time. Like, I can't do it with Agustin Ramírez. I understand why people do, but that's not how I'm going to build my rosters.
I'm going to pick as my bust Carter Jensen. We talked a little bit about what his playing time will look like. Let's say that you're right. It is 3 players for 3 positions, and he still gets his fair share. I doubt he'll get a large share of playing time. You know, when you're talking about would he get to 400 or 500 plate appearances, I'm worried about that. But beyond that, Carter Jensen had a 28% strikeout rate in AAA. Why am I bringing up something that he just did in 184 plate appearances in AAA? Well, the AAA strike zone is sort of coming to the major leagues in the form of ABS and the challenge system. So I just wonder if there was something about that strike zone that was tough on him. We do have some higher strikeout rates. If he's on the higher end and he's projected for basically a 24, 25% strikeout rate going forward, then I think the batting average becomes risky. And then you're putting a lot of reliance on his power. So I think he ends up being closer to a 230 10 guy, 230 15 guy than people want. They want more than that out of him.
Yeah, there's a pretty steep price on Carter Jensen. I'm a little more intrigued than you are at the price because I'm pretty optimistic about the playing time. But if that swing and miss is a problem, that could eat into the playing time very quickly, at least in the early part of the season. A little nugget before we go. So I was talking about fly balls and line drives at 95 plus on a few episodes. I upped that EV threshold to 100 since we have some reason to believe that makes a bigger difference based on some of the conversation in the Discord. 2 players from this episode, a little higher on that leaderboard than I expected. I mean, Cal Raleigh is not a surprise given the season he had. He had 121 batted balls in the air at 100 or more in 2025. But the
Not
2 surprises for me, Sal Perez still up there at number 8 with 112. And Ben Rice tied for 17th with 100 batted balls at 100 plus in the air. So, Now you got me thinking a little more about Ben Rice and whether or not I'm fully on board at the current price, but definitely belongs in that tier. Just thinking about that order a little bit more.
One of the oldest tricks in fantasy baseball has been to get the catcher who's not playing catcher.
Yep.
I remember all the way back to Josh Willingham. Ooh,
that's about the first one I can remember. Yeah,
that's a
Josh
pull.
Willingham.
I can't believe I can remember that. Yeah, Josh Willingham, baby. I love getting catchers that aren't catching. So that's a little part of the Agustin Ramírez. I wanted to call him a bust myself, but what if he just still gets 550 plate appearances because he's their DH? Because it's not like their DHs are great, So I hear you on there being flaws in his game, though, and that that ADP is fairly high.
It's just the struggling to take a player whose real life value lags that far behind fantasy value. But as a guy that was a rookie last year, he could follow the projections, take a step forward, and make me look like a fool. Bust calls often make us look like fools. I'm willing to take on the risk, though, with Ramírez in this case.
Join our Discord. Carter Jensen could make me look like a fool.
He could, but at least he goes a little bit later where it's like, well, yeah, there's lots of busts in the pick 200 range, right? I feel the worst. I don't like any of my bust calls in the sense that it's not fun to root against players, but saying that Junior Caminero is being overdrafted and CJ Abrams is being overdrafted, those are guys that I like. I want to see them be good big league players. I want them to make me wrong. But it's not fun to be wrong in our business either. So anyway, join the Discord. We can continue the conversation there. Share your bust and your sleepers at the position. Again, if you made it all the way to the end of this video, be sure to hit the like button. Thanks to everybody who made it all the way through this. That's going to do it for this episode of Rates and Barrels. We're back with you on Wednesday.
Thanks for listening.